Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming. This is a little seminar on how to set up a 501c3 nonprofit. And it is, thankfully, we have our speakers, Elizabeth Roth, Beth, I know her as, and Ed David, both members of the Greater Salem, New Hampshire Rotary Club. And they are experienced in the process of setting up such entities and consulting with nonprofits. We'll also have present some members of Rotary Clubs who already have their own 501 set up and can speak about their past experiences and results. So I will turn it over to Beth, please.
Thank you very much, Terry. And thank you, Terry and Alexander and David, for helping to coordinate and organize our work tonight. Ed David, thank you for being part of this presentation. Ed and I tolerate each other at our Rotary meetings every Friday morning. So I know Ed from way back, and we do complement each other with our two practices. Ed, I will introduce first, but before I introduce Ed, I just wanted to give you a quick briefing of tonight's meeting. We're going to give you what is a 501c3 nonprofit, and then the second part will be how to set one up in Massachusetts. Ed will do the nuts and bolts of what is it, and then as an attorney practicing in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, we both have backgrounds. Ed is a CPA in doing this for many years for nonprofit organizations. That being said, tonight's meeting is going to be more of general information, and we do have clubs here that have already established their 501c3 and probably have some good old war stories to share with us, and we hope you can when we're finished giving our presentation. However, if you do need individualized attention with for a CPA or an attorney, it might be too involved to be answering your questions tonight. I don't know about Ed. I'm sure he might share a little bit of this about his practice, but I've offered some handouts that were distributed just before the meeting began. And in the handouts, you'll see contact information for both Ed and myself, a recap of what we said tonight, some links so that you can look up more information on your own. And I've offered to pro bono work with any District 7930 club for 1 hour's work so that I can answer your questions. And please, this is not an advertisement for my law firm. It is an offer to help you to get you on the right footing so that you can pursue what you want to do as you go forward. So that being said, Ed David is, I'd like to introduce him as someone in New Hampshire that always helps out nonprofits. I think he has an experience with almost every nonprofit in the southern part of New Hampshire because they seek him out for the information that he gives to them. The good news is he is a longtime member and a Paul Harris Fellow in our Greater Salem, New Hampshire organization club, and he knows intimately what a Rotary Club needs to do in order to make charitable contributions and yet run the organization with their operational expenses. So with that, Ed, I'm going to turn the program over to you so that you can give us the nuts and bolts of all the tax information that we need to know going forward.
All right, thanks, Beth. Good night, good evening, everybody. Looks like Tony just joined us as well. So this is great. There's like 21 of us on this. So as Beth said, yeah, I practice in Southern New Hampshire. I grew up in Mass, like most of us in New Hampshire, where we were not born in this state. So the firm is in Hampstead, which is a little bit east of Salem. So 10 minutes into the state of New Hampshire, and that's where my firm is. We've been doing this since 1986. Yes, the years are beginning to show their, my lack of hair is one of them. But I want to just talk briefly about the three basic not-for-profits. You have your 501c4, you have your 501c6, and then you have the 501c3, which I think is the whole topic for tonight. most of the Rotary clubs that I've run across are either C4s or C6s. C6s are typically more your chamber type organizations they're doing more business development. C6s and membership organizations, which is typically what most of us are as Rotarians. C3, there's two types of C3s, like our Rotary Foundation is a 501c3. That's a foundation. Typically, a foundation is an organization that's been created by one other organization, a family, or just a handful of people, like the Gates Foundation. Then you have a charity, a 501c3, and a 501c3 is basically general public and or a government that creates it. So what I mean by general public, right now most of us, I assume, are running some type of fundraising, whether we're doing a golf tournament, a cornhole tournament. What we're doing now, because we're not C3s, is we are selling ads. We're selling sponsorships. Those monies come in and we're still able to do the good things that we do in the greater communities that we serve. If you are a 501c3, some neat things kind of come about. For one thing, I know of a club in New Hampshire. Someone left them a bequest. So they were set up as a C3. So they were a charity. A member died. A member with significant money died, gave that club 7-figure bequest. So upon his death, this club received more than $1 million. It went into the charity. It was actually a charitable donation on that person's estate. And now this club has the means to do whatever they really want going in the future. Our club, which has been around almost, I think this March will be 21 years. We have been fortunate enough that we've had some good foresight in our board where we are squirreling money away. And our goal is, once we have $100,000, we're going to set it up in an endowment so our core activities can continue to go forward, whether or not we're able to sustain with our fundraising. So 501c3, the first call you need to make would be to an attorney, because you need to be a corporation to be able to qualify as a C3. I don't know how many times I've sat with somebody in my office where I'm going to do the cheap thing. I go online and I set up an LLC because everybody wants to be an LLC. An LLC, a limited liability company, is the wrong form. You need to be organized as a corporation. So that is the first thing. Go see a lawyer. Then you need a federal ID number. The lawyer can do it, a CPA can do it, or if you have somebody who's knowledgeable in your club that can answer half a dozen questions, they can go online and get a federal ID number. The federal ID number allows you to go open up a bank account before you get a determination letter from the IRS saying that you do qualify as a 501c3. The biggest mistake I've seen in the last 5 years that clients have made is they go, and now the IRS has changed things. You can only electronically file for not-for-profit status. It used to be that you'd fill out a form and mail it to the IRS. Now the IRS does not accept anything but electronic. There's two forms. And if I'm going too quick, please somebody put up a stop sign. There's two forms that we have the ability to file. One is a Form 1023, which is 23 pages long. Who wants to do that? Not me. There's a simple form. It's a 1023 EZ. The difference between the EZ and the 1023, there's 30 questions. If you answer those 30 questions, yes, go right ahead and do the 1023 EZ. You're going to be happy because you're going to spend half an hour or an hour with a CPA or a lawyer doing it. And the IRS is going to be happy because they're going to electronically get it. They're going to review it. And then they're going to say, oh, this qualifies. We're done here. The three key questions that you don't want to have problems with, and they're really kind of easy. Your charity is just starting. You have no idea what you're going to collect in annual receipts going forward. So one of the questions is, are you going to receive 50 grand of income in the next 3 years, over each of the next 3 years? You're brand new. Your club might receive 50 grand, but you really truly have no idea how well your charity is going to do. So I advise my clients, you answer that saying you're not going to receive more than 50 grand. Does your charity, again, not your club, does your charity that's brand new have assets of 250 grand? How's that possible if you're brand new? And then the last thing is, are you organized as anything other than a corporation? That's why I said the LLC is not the route to go. Those three questions, as long as you do not answer them as yes, you can do the 1023 EZ. And to me, and with all honesty, I did one a couple of weeks ago. I think I was online with the IRS for about 25 minutes. The client was sitting at my desk and we got the application filed. He called me yesterday to say that he's already got his IRS determination letter. So it can be very, very quick. If you have to do the long form, you have to give them 3 years worth of budgets. And there's a whole slew of questions they're asking about how you're organized as far as who your board members are you a representation of the community, and so forth. So I truly try to push most clients into doing the 1023 EZ. So that would be my reason for doing the EZ form. I have one other thing I want to swing into a little bit before we go back to Beth and or open up the questions. How many of you present, your clubs are filing annual reporting forms with both the IRS, state of Mass, or New Hampshire? Just give me a hand raise if your club's actually filing. Okay, the clubs, oh, I like what David W. is doing this here. That's a little interesting answer. Your club
We've done
should
the
be.
federal, but not the state.
Are
that
you in
I'm aware
Mass?
of. We did the IRS, but not an annual Massachusetts, because I haven't written them a check.
Okay, so Massachusetts, I believe, and Beth can talk a little bit more about this. Massachusetts has an annual report that's due in November with, I think it's a $15 or $25 fee. It's very small, but an awful lot of clubs don't do the federal form, nor do they do the state filings, because they believe they're not-for-profit, so there is no reporting. The IRS has a real simple one. It's a postcard if you're under 50 grand. So it's there's really no reason to do it. In New Hampshire, we have some gambling sources of revenue. That becomes a different, because the net profit on that is subject to federal tax on that. So there are some curveballs there. Beth, I think I have hit upon some of the tax, and now maybe you can roll into the legal issues.
Sure. And Ed, I know, has already given you quite a bit of information. And again, the handouts that we handed out to you has a recap of the information that he just went over. So don't be concerned about writing down websites and whatever. When I meet with a client at my firm, I like to sit down with them and just have an initial consultation. And I never charge for my initial consultation. And I'm saying that twice now. Why? Because I want people to inquire with an attorney before they go forward, so that you know that you're in the right direction. I don't really, I'm hoping to service you fully after that initial consultation, but there are a lot of self-starters, and Zoom is, I'm sorry, what is it, legal fees or whatever they do on the internet is something that people do frequent. And when you go and look at some of these forms, they look like they're easy to complete and go forward. If you have questions or concerns, or at least get it started, have a roadmap of how you're going to go forward with establishing your 501c3. Most attorneys will sit down with you and give you that roadmap when you contact them for the first meeting. That being said, it's not rocket science. It's just a lot of steps, and it's a lot of forms. And I do have in my outline the forms enumerated for what you need to do. And I can go over those steps with you very quickly. Don't feel like you have to write them down because I've already sent them to you, so you have them all written down. The first thing that you do, as Ed said, was you choose your initial directors and officers for your nonprofit. And that 501c3 can be similar officers and directors of your club that you're going to be, that you have. As a Rotary Club, you do understand that as a Rotary Club, and I put this little form in your packet as well. This comes from RI, and it gives you some facts and answers a lot of the frequently asked questions about, well, do we have a 501c4? Are we under the Rotary 501c4? What can we do with that? And all of that is true. This handout sheet, though, gives you more information that's in writing in front of you as you're considering if you want to also become a 501c3 with an ancillary corporation, not your club, your ancillary corporation. There are quite a few formalities of people in organizations that you have to notify when you're and register, especially if you're registering in Massachusetts, so that you are going to be able to take advantage of the non-profit tax status once you do get your IRS delineation as a 501c3. And that's also in the information that I've left with you. But don't forget to notify Rotary International. They want to know if you have established a 501c3 corporation as well. And the information is on the frequently asked questions that I have in the handout packet. So what is the mystery? It's not. You choose your initial directors and officers for your nonprofit, and then you choose a name for it. And like Ed said, ours is we use the word foundation to differentiate between our organization of the Greater Salem, New Hampshire Rotary Club. Rotary International wants us to have a differentiation between your operational expenses and your charitable giving expenses. So that being said, if you're not a 501c3 at this point and you haven't registered as a 501c3, at least keep separate records, separate books, separate bank books if your records and statements. If your accountant hasn't advised you to do so yet, you should be doing that, of course, starting today. The name that you choose for your nonprofit corporation is the second thing that you do. And then you appoint a registered agent. What is the registered agent and how do you appoint the registered agent? You ask for the person that would accept the duties of the registered agent. That's a person that lives in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And if you are located in Massachusetts, and I'm assuming that each club here is, except for the Greater Salem Club. And that registered agent is the contact person, and the contact address for the Secretary of State to reach you if there is any concerns regarding your corporation. And then you're going to prepare and file your nonprofit articles of organization. And those are your corporate articles. And I have, again, given you the website where you file those and where you get more information for filing those articles to establish your nonprofit within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts at the Secretary of State's office. You prepare then your bylaws. And this becomes extremely important because when you start revisiting the IRS information, you're going to find that you should have certain information, purposes, and documentation within your bylaws. And you want to make sure that you're following the roadmap before you actually file and then get rejected by the IRS. And that's why, again, it's helpful to have someone who has the legal background that has done this before that can help you out with with that information, especially to develop your bylaws. You hold a meeting then with your board of directors for the nonprofit corporation. And that meeting is usually to discuss your information going forward, what you need to do as far as your purposes, who your officers are, who your directors are, and you can have minutes of that meeting, and that's your meeting of incorporation.
Hey, Beth, let me
yes.
break in there for a second.
Sure.
Do have a couple of outside of district with us, so there is Maine here, and
Okay,
is
that's right.
New Hampshire and Vermont, so these basically the same kind of things.
I have streamlined the state activities to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. However, anytime we talk about the IRS, anytime we talk about your 501c3, that's all federal, and that's the same for everyone in the country, or every corporation in the country that is filing for a 501c3. There are probably nuances with Maine. New Hampshire is almost pretty similar as Massachusetts, but I do find that Massachusetts probably is more intense as far as the filings that you have to do in Massachusetts versus New Hampshire. I have not filed a charitable organization in Maine. I'm not admitted to practice in Maine, so I have not done that. So I would advise you to seek out, the information from an attorney in Maine. Thank you, Andy. I will do. I have references if you need them. Terry, you had
One more thing. You referred to someone registers with the Secretary of State. Who is that person? So is it the president of your club? Does that person have to be a financial person or an attorney or what? That was unclear. We spoke about that.
So when you do your registration, you're going to have probably someone that's going to be involved with doing the red tape of doing this work. You don't want to leave it up to a committee. You do want to have a point person that's going to be in charge with deadlines, following it through, meeting who they need to meet with, and understand what the organization wants to accomplish. Oftentimes it could be your registered agent. And that's what you might want to be doing at your first meeting when you have the group of you together within that first meeting. And this does not have to be a number of people necessarily. That's going to be part of the initial conception of it. You only need in Massachusetts to form a corporation. You only need one director. You need your officers, but you need one director. But when you file for your IRS taxation exemption, the rules might be a little bit different than the rules are with Massachusetts. So that's why you need to have that point person who could be your attorney to go forward. One thing I must say, and this is why Ed and I work together so well, and I'm appreciative that he said, this is what you do. You get an attorney for this, and then he goes in as a CPA doing that. I try very hard not to do the details of a CPA that's working with advising a client on taxation purposes. They have the best knowledge and the background and the experiences of the regulations of the IRS that they work with on a daily basis. In turn, the CPA usually or should not be giving you legal advice necessarily, even though the legal advice that they give oftentimes, is an area of the law that they're always involved with. Things do change and the lawyers get the updates more often than the CPAs would be aware of some updates or changes in the laws. And so Ed and I have worked together on other things, and I do know that there is a good synergy between law and accounting principles when we work together. And so you don't just have one person, Terry, as a long answer to your question. Surround yourself with professionals and with people that you trust to rely on to advise your companies I'm sorry, your corporation and your clubs.
Beth,
So
can I just jump in for a minute?
yeah, you go right ahead.
Because I'm not sure if I may have misunderstood Terry's question, but I thought she was asking about the term registered agent. And if that was your question, from my perspective, I tell my clients not to have be their board members, because your board members change every year. With Massachusetts, if you change that person, you have to file with the state of Massachusetts Attorney General's office saying you've changed your designee.
Okay.
So this is a point in time where I do normally tell my clients, if you're in Massachusetts, have your attorney do it, because your attorney's probably going to be there for the long haul. Yeah, they may charge you something for doing, for serving in that role, but your president changes every year. Your board changes every 3 or 4 years. So you want to have some continuity there.
Right. I agree with what you're saying. I'm probably the registered agent for 90% of the companies that I advise. It's easier for them to know, and I keep good records and files and documentation, and so it's a simple thing to do. However, I only have really one point of advice for your registered agent, and that is, don't get an agency to do it. Don't get one of these registered agent companies. I had a huge lawsuit that cost my client over $3 million about 5 years ago, because they had a registered agent company out in Michigan that did not do the work that they were supposed to do. And the company ultimately is liable. So don't hire a company to do it that does it for for their services to you. Have a live body that you trust for the registered agent. If I can go on, you're going to prepare and file your nonprofit articles of organization. You're going to prepare your bylaws. You're holding your meeting with your board. And around that time, you're going to obtain your EIN number from the IRS website or through your accountant or your attorney. That's not a huge thing to do, but sometimes you'll have questions when you're on the website and you need to know exactly how to answer them, because the timeout on those forms are not gentle for the person that is not used to filling out those forms. So I have the website on this handout for you so that you can take a look at it. But that's the next thing that you do is get your EIN number. You'll file an annual report each year once you're established, even before you get to your 501c3. November 1st, I believe that is the deadline for Massachusetts.
Yes, in Massachusetts, yep.
Okay, and there you are. You've created your nonprofit corporation in Massachusetts by following those steps. That's only the first step. What do you do next? Well, that's where Ed started talking about. You file your form 1023 with your federal with the federal tax exemption application. If you want to see a 1023 EZ, or if you want to see the long form, I also have the URL on this handout for you to take a look at that too. And it's not going to hurt to take a look, download the forms, print them out, do what you want, and prepare them and discuss them with your board as you're completing the information. So once your corporation has its IRS 501c3 exemption status, you're eligible for exemptions from Massachusetts income taxes. And in order to file for that, you would register with the Massachusetts Department of Revenue and supply them with a copy of your IRS exemption letter that you obtained for your 501c3. And I have the URL in the information for you to look that up as well. There's also a Massachusetts sales tax exemption that you may be qualified for that you can file for, and a Massachusetts property tax exemption if your charitable corporation will be holding real estate property. Other state reporting depends on the size of your corporation. And that is the Massachusetts Attorney General. And Ed talked about that a little bit earlier as well. And it's the Attorney General's nonprofit organization, Public Charities Division. You don't want to get on the wrong side of this division. And I do have cases where nonprofits have been on the wrong side of this division because they're not reporting their charitable contributions or profit making with Massachusetts. As far as there is another registration that you may or not need to be doing, but usually all public charities that are doing business in Massachusetts must register with the nonprofit Public Charities Division of the Attorney General's office. I don't have all the information for you to look at for that, but it is just a registration. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're filing reports with them. It's just a registration because the Attorney General wants to know who is asking the Commonwealth's people for money within the organization or within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That being said, the most important thing is this. Looking at your fundraising and the monies that you make in fundraising will determine if you want to go through the steps of becoming a nonprofit corporation. I think it's well worth it for certain clubs to do that. I think it's something to discuss with your attorney and with your CPA. And if you choose to go forward with the 501c3, just know that there's a lot of forms, a lot of things we talked about tonight, but it's not that hard. It really is just like peeling an onion. You've got one step at a time to follow through. And it's a collection of documentation. It's filling out forms. But once you're completed, you do have the power to then do the fundraising that you want to do. You can become a tax exempt organization. You can accept donations and freely raise funds for charities within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and other states, for those of you that are from other states. If I have been too focused on Massachusetts, however, and there's someone in the audience here that would like more information, I've left my information on my my form. Just email me and I'm happy to look up your state and make sure that you are directed to the proper URLs for your state to do the same.
Beth, we got a question from Caroline there.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Beth. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm hijacking. I'm sort of coming in here as an interloper from District 7850. So I'm in Vermont. My question is, I apologize, I was a little late. So I just want to make sure our Rotary Club has established a 501c3, as I understand it, here in Barre, Vermont. I wasn't involved in that. But as a district governor-elect, I'm really trying to focus, hopefully next year, some of our clubs, or hopefully all of our clubs, on establishing what I'm calling Rotary legacy funds, which would mean that each club hopefully would create a 501c3 if they have not already, with the idea that we can start to capture goodwill from Rotary members who are retiring and possibly eventually, unfortunately, leaving us, so that their estates can perhaps donate some of that goodwill to our Rotary clubs, so that maybe we're not as enslaved to constantly fundraising and we can focus more on generating income from the principal of those funds and then doing good works with those. Is that concept consistent with what you're telling us? I mean, is that consistent with a 501c3 foundation, nonprofit organization as you've described it?
So I don't know if you were here when Ed was talking about a club that he was working with previously, but it sounds like he has firsthand experience with a club that did exactly that. So Ed, why don't I let you pick up with information on that for Caroline?
Yeah, Caroline, if you have a 501c3, you can receive bequests at someone's death. If you're a 501c4, C6, they can give you money, but they're not going to get a tax deduction from them. So your concept of a Rotary legacy fund's outstanding. There's a club not too far from you in Concord, New Hampshire, who they set theirs up many years ago, but they may be somebody who's a good source for you if you're having some issues with it. But without question, if you're a 501c3, it becomes advantageous to Rotarians as we retire or pass to give bequests to the clubs.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Caroline, I'll give you another quick thing. We have an office in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and my partner there is Matt Donahue, and he's admitted to practice in Vermont. So I can put you in contact with him if you have other questions, and I will hold him to it for my 1 hour of free consultation. He doesn't know that yet, but I will make that happen for you.
That is so kind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sounds like Beth's buying her partner lunch.
I'm doing more than that, I'm sure.
So I'll just speak at least from my own firm's perspective. First time meeting with a client, I don't care if you're not for profit or for profit. I don't charge for the first hour. It's just what we do. I didn't think to put it into the letterhead, but that's always been my policy. So. Is this a good opportunity, Terry, to open it up for other questions or?
Absolutely. Just put your hands up. We'll call on you and you can ask questions. Go ahead, David.
First question, ballpark. If you're going to do this, how much money would it cost in accounting fees and legal fees just to get it started? And then second of all, annual maintenance of that. What I'm trying to get at is how much money is the ongoing cost of doing this, and is it really worth it for our club?
If you're able to file the 1023 EZ, and let me preface this, I did one, and it's within the past 2 years, their fee was somewhere between $500 and $750, and ongoing services that have been needed for accounting, I've been doing pro bono because the charity has a special interest to me. What I think most of our clubs really should have a CPA and probably a lawyer on your club membership. And I would think that it'd be very difficult with the service above self motto for that person not to heavily discount it. So in my viewpoint, your ongoing fees on the accounting side should be less than $1,000. Beth could probably speak, or I know we have at least one other attorney that's on the screen. Beth could talk as to what her firm does. Obviously, they're giving an hour free up front. But if you're doing the 1023 EZ form, it's a piece of cake. If you're doing the form 1023, that's several $1,000s to get that up and rolling. That process is not one anybody wants to do.
And I will agree with Ed. My approach when I work with nonprofits, any nonprofits, is educate so that the members of the nonprofit are able to do the work themselves, and then I just kind of supervise what they're doing, and I don't charge for that fee. But they're getting the experience, and they're pulling the information to me. There are legal fees that are involved for some of the registration that you have to do, and I'm not able to waive those fees, of course, because those are fees that would be charged to you. As far as annual maintenance, you do file annual reports on it, like we said. And I believe, I'm not sure if the charitable ones are the same as the regular corporations in Massachusetts, but I believe it's $150 for an annual report in Massachusetts for a corporation. Ed, do you know what the fee is for charitable? I want to say it's $95, but I could be wrong.
It's less than $100, but
Right.
I was just going to let you go with it, but it's less than $100. Yeah.
Right, I agree, and most states will do that. I know New Hampshire makes that a lower amount, and I think New Hampshire is much lower. I think it's like $45 or something like that.
25.
You're shaking your head, Andy. Is it the same in Maine?
I'm actually not sure about Maine, but New Hampshire is $25.
It's
Yes.
$25.
I have clubs in both states.
Right. You know, and Ed and I are on this call or on this meeting because we do have the similar philosophies. We are Rotarians, and it is service above self. And when we see a nonprofit that's trying to do good work and mirror the work that we do in life, you know, we kind of are, you know, giving in that regard.
So as a follow-up, it's sort of, I'm on the board of a different foundation that is a 501c3, but our Rotary Club has a foundation that gives scholarships to students, high school students who go to college. On my other foundation, we're not allowed to give money to individuals. We're limited to only giving money to other 501c3s. So how does becoming a 501c3 restrict your giving or your activities, if at all?
The 501c3 by itself, to my knowledge, does not. But when you create a foundation, normally a foundation is created for specific purposes. But like the Gates Foundation has given up, well, we know as Rotarians, have given out millions upon millions of dollars. So I would suggest, David, that maybe the bylaws for your foundation are restrictive for some reason. You can just do the charitable, I mean, the scholarships through your regular C4, C6. So I guess I'm a little confused as to why your foundation is not able to. But I would suspect it goes back to the original organization.
Maybe you didn't understand what I was saying. I'm on a different foundation.
Yes, no, I understand it, different than Rotary, yeah.
But our Rotary Foundation is I think it's a C4, and it gives scholarships.
Yeah.
If it becomes, so cannot 501c3s give money to individuals, or is that prohibited? To individuals, Gates gives foundation to Rotary tons of money, but he gives it to Rotary, not to an individual. And I'm concerned that we can't give it to the student.
I have C3s who give money, who give scholarships.
Okay.
So I don't know why your foundation is prohibited from doing so.
We have
Beth,
a
could you
question
chime
asking
in?
you to re-explain C3, 4, and 6 again.
Okay, so all three of those are non-for-profits. They're not-for-profits. In other words, they're not subject to federal tax. I'm probably going to mess this up when I go through it, but C6, like your Chamber of Commerce, are typically C6 because they have membership on one hand, but they also have the business community. We're trying to, lobby. We're doing different things. That's why a lot of them are C6s. C4s, which are membership groups, civic clubs, service clubs, like we are. I believe most of the Rotarian clubs that I know are C4s because they're memberships. Again, you're not for profit. You're not taxed. The only difference really is what you're able to do with the money you receive. C4, C6, you cannot write a letter to a family and say, thank you for this donation, because you don't qualify because you're not a C3. So if somebody wants to give your club money, they can sponsor an event. I know there's, I think it's Doreen that works for Leader Bank. I'm sure her bank sponsors Rotary events and they take it as an ad. So the company still gets the expense. But if you have a family who's sitting on unrealized stock and they want to donate that to you, it's a great deal for taxes on their side and they get to donate it. They have to donate that to a 501c3. So if they have, I don't know, I'm going to pick on the local animal shelter, who's set up as a C3, or they have the local Rotary Club, even though they've been a Rotarian for all their lives, if they want to get that charitable deduction, they're going to give it to the C3. So the power of the C3 is not how you change the way you operate, but it's you raise your hand and you tell people out there, we are now a C3. This allows us to accept your donations so we can build our endowment, so we can better the future. I mean, really, in a nutshell, that's the difference. And if I did not explain that well enough, please ask questions. That's the best part about tonight.
I'll
There's a
just
question.
If I could just add a little bit more to that. Once you get on the form for your application for establishing yourself as a 501c something, you're going to find that this chapter of the IRS tax code is huge. And there's many designations, you know, under the 501 chapter. That being said, most nonprofits in the 501c3 category is at organizations that are formed for religious, charitable, scientific, literary, or educational purposes. And you actually have to answer those questions, you know, what within your application, where do you fall? And sometimes you might not get accepted for a 501c3 because your purpose or your reasons for organizing and the donations that you want to raise and you want to give don't fall into the silos that they will require. And so that's why you need to have the assistance of someone that's familiar with applying to the IRS, not necessarily to create something that isn't accurate, but so that you understand, you know, what the nuances are, so that you can file within the status of the 501c3. Ed, would you agree with that, or have you found anything different with that?
No, I would agree, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on something.
Yeah.
Your club is not going to change their original designation. So if you're a C4 or a C6, your club is still going to stay a C4, C6. This C3 is a new entity. So it's not replacing, you know, your membership fees, your payments to Rotary, your food pantry work. It's not changing anything there. You're going to have two organizations. You're going to have your C4, C6 that you've always had.
Right.
Then you're going to add a C3. And I think if I'm reading into what I've seen on a couple chats, there was some confusion on that.
Okay. I haven't looked at the chats yet, and I should. John, you had a question. But you're muted.
Me, or I'm muting myself.
Okay.
Anyway, if I have I'm raising money for a specific charity and I have costs associated with that particular event, be it take it a turkey trot, and there's some expenses related to that to raise money. Can I take that money out of a 501c3, or do I have to pay through it 501c4?
No, that's a valid expense of your C3 organization.
Thank you very much. That's what I thought, but I wanted to have, like being an attorney, you know the answer before you ask the question, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that there are certain expenses that are directly related to you raising money that you can use the 501c3 money for.
So John, before you hang up, I was when I first saw your name, I was a little concerned because I have a very good friend of the same name, and we call him the Reverend in our club. He's the one that gives our prayer every week, and I was like, I didn't want him snooping on us, but I'm happy it was you.
No, I'm an alternate prayer giver, but we have a pastor that's usually giving our prayer.
There you go.
Thank you.
Caroline, did you have another question over there? You got your hand up, or you're just happy? It's okay. Darlene, did that answer your questions that you had? Excellent. Anybody else have a question?
Okay.
Sure, Ed.
I'm in the Beverly Club, and some other members before I joined the club had set up a foundation about 20 years ago. And I took over leading the foundation about 5 years ago. So my questions are kind of down the road a little bit, not so much setting up a foundation or a 501c3, but some of the things that go along with it. So when I took over, I was checking on a few requirements that we might have to do on an ongoing basis. And one of them was the IRS substantiation requirements, which is basically when you get donations that you send thank you letters, and you want to provide a receipt so that people have something. I forget off the top of my head what the dollar amount is, but I think it's around 250 or something like that, that they're supposed to have a paper receipt. They can't just depend on their canceled check. And then the second thing is, as far as quid pro quo. So if we have a fundraising banquet and the cost of the ticket is $250 and the cost of the meal is $100, so we would want to specify in the thank you letter, $100 goes to the meal. You have a tax deductible donation of $150 on top of that. So I just like to confirm that with both Beth and Ed. And then the second thing, I'll just pose both questions at the same time. We found out that there are requirements. We do a lot of fundraising through raffles. And my understanding is in Massachusetts, there is a requirement through the Massachusetts Lottery Commission that we have to get licensed in whatever community we are holding raffles. And then when we do have a raffle, we have to pay a tax of 5% of the gross proceeds of that raffle. And then we have to file annual reports. So these are some of the additional things on top of just setting it up and doing your annual reporting to the IRS and the Attorney General's office in the Commonwealth that you may have to do. So I just like to get your comments on that.
So I'm going to jump in quick because Ed will have the most to say about this question, but Edward, I'm going to talk about licensing. I skipped over that as far as what you do for your 501c3 as you're getting going, because it's almost too much for tonight, but you're absolutely right. There are raffle funding and licensing for other things that you may have to do. And that's why it's always really important to have someone with a legal mind, either in your organization or that you've contacted an attorney, because you have to be licensed to do certain things. You would hate to have your fundraising event and have it be shut down in the middle of it while you're making all this good money, for your charities. So yes, Ed, I'll defer to you for the rest of the information that Edward is trying to get from us.
I think Ed is dead on. You have to do, those are without question, that is the proper documentation you're supposed to send on for the donation. And when it's a mixed donation between a dinner or some other event, yes, you definitely have to put some dollar amount, some fair market value. So not your cost, it's a fair market value for what that dinner costs. So you're right on if you're doing that. Mass lottery, yes, there's no question about that. That's a tax. And I would suggest you're probably also subject to the federal income tax on that as well. The federal code for taxes paid by not-for-profits is if the event cannot happen without the not-for-profit's involvement, there's a tax filing due. New Hampshire, we have a real funky rule. It's called for Texas Hold'ems. For them to do them in the state of New Hampshire, you have to have a not-for-profit there, not so much there in person, but they have to be aligned with the event. So for example, our club, quote unquote, we host 7 Texas Hold'ems during the year. The gaming company could not hold that event without us being there. So in my interpretation, that means that the club is integral to that process. So our club takes a position, it's taxable. In the greater Salem community, it's a nonstop fight because there's probably 50 to 60% of the organizations who are receiving this money who are paying the tax. and there's another 35 to 40% who are not. At some point in time, the IRS is going to wake up to this, but yes, there's a federal tax. In Massachusetts, there's both a federal and a mass tax. So looks like John has a question.
Yeah, we just did have a raffle, a post-pandemic raffle, and we raised some decent money, and we were able to distribute it to 2 nurses, which worked out really good. And then we have some money to then contribute to Rotary Foundation and community organizations. My question is that we didn't, until right tonight, I didn't know that there was some filing that we had to do. We did our raffle and it was very successful, but is there something that we have to do post the raffle? That we have to let our accountant know, or do we just let it
You
go?
probably want to have a conversation with your accountant, and then he or she will make a decision with you based upon the dollar amount and what
Okay.
your exposure is.
Okay,
With this Texas Hold'em that's happening in New Hampshire, I mean, their organization's getting netting after cost between $70,000 and $100,000.
well,
It's not small dollars.
yeah,
So
that's a lot of
the
money.
IRS is going to want to get their dime on that at some point. If you're talking, you made a couple thousand, I would probably sit down with you and say, let's not worry about it. Let's all be adults and know that it's there, but I wouldn't worry about it.
No, it came around, it's like gonna be around $15,000, we think. Where do we go with that? It's not huge, but it is a sum that we were successful to be able to raise in a couple of months.
Who prepares your return?
CPA,
I would have a conversation with the CPA and defer to his
okay,
opinion on that.
okay,
I can tell you right now, in Salem, I could sit across the room from 3 of us, 3 CPAs, all the same education, and two of us do something one way and the other one is completely different.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Marblehead, you got to get the form from basically the town manager, and they give you a package. And in the package, you have to say what it's going to be, and then you have to get it signed off by the police department. They have to know about it, and the tax return's in the package. And when you're done, you file it, and it's the tax is on the gross amount, not the net amount. It's the gross amount received.
And the tax rate is what, 5%?
5%. Right.
So we could conceivably owe $750.
Yeah, don't make that mistake.
Yeah, no, I got that. Yeah, $750 to the state.
Yeah.
So Arthur, does that cover raffles, poker, bingo, that type of things?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so, but
New Hampshire,
I made the same mistake. I came into it in Marblehead. I'm the new treasurer, although I know how to do this stuff. We did exactly the same thing. We raised about 20 grand, all for scholarship money. And we had a guy who was the treasurer that was doing this year in and year out and year in and year out. And because of the pandemic, it was kind of being run, through Zoom and trying to get it organized. Then we came out and none of us knew to do this. So we went back to the town manager and said, can we just fill all of this stuff out and file it? And what she told us is just lay your head low and forget it. There's not enough money involved. Right. And if they come back, you just pay it. The other thing I wanted to mention to people is one of the things that we wrestled with in terms of scholarships is that we used to require that the money go to the schools, but that affected their eligibility. We weren't sure if they were in school or not. That ensured that it was actually going to the right purpose, because in order to maintain your charity, the purpose of the funds is to be used for charitable purposes. So then there was pressure on us to just give the money directly to the recipient. And I felt very uncomfortable with that, particularly as the money got larger. And if the recipient of the money was a minor, bothered me a lot to hand $3,000 to a minor who could go out and buy a car, and get in an accident and we could get sued. So the IRS, the language for scholarships basically says that if you receive a scholarship, a fellowship grant, or other grant, all or part of the amounts you receive may be tax-free. Scholarship, fellowship grants, and other grants are tax-free if you meet the following conditions, and that is that you're a full-time student. And so what I did is I put together a folder. I put together a folder that had the language, because the obligation really is with the kid. Otherwise it's income to them. I don't want to lose my tax exempt status. On the other, and I want to ensure that the money's being used properly. And if the kid is a minor, I have the check issued to both the parent and the child, and they sign a form that actually designates this IRS thing, saying they will use it properly. So at least we have a trail saying that we were forthright with regard to what we were trying to do. Our risk is really the loss of our status. Their risk is it's taxable, as income to them.
That's excellent suggestions.
One question, Arthur, is that distributed, this is Jack, is that distributed through your 501c3?
Yes, everything but meals. So anything related to paying Rotary dues, everything related to meals and everything is in the 501c4.
Cool. Yeah.
And the 3 does everything. And one of the things that we have a number of situations in which people are doing, and we're doing this as an idea to increase membership as well. We have a number of people trying to raise funds that aren't big enough to do this kind of thing, but they meet the charitable standards. And so we're going to start in terms of raising funds for some of our, the improvement of some of our parks and the like, to use our 501(c)(3) status as a way to have the money come through us. But the important thing there is that we have to pay the bills. It has to meet charitable purpose, and we have to pay the bills.
Right.
There's a lot more administration with that, because we got to ensure that the funds are being used appropriately. That would be what the IRS would want us to do. And we're doing this with some of the wives of some members, the husband or the wife is a member and their spouse is doing something, and we want to show support for them too, even in the kinds of things they're doing.
Right.
So that's another thing that we're exploring doing.
Thank you.
Linda's got a question?
Hi, I'm a member of the Marblehead Harbor Rotary Club. We were incorporated as a 501c3 back in 1997, a year after we started. We do have 2 separate accounts for operating and charitable purposes. The charitable one would be the 501c3, but as far as I know, there's no paperwork that I could find that we ever also requested a 501c4 designation. Is that something we have to apply for?
So it's my understanding that you are eligible if you have not applied as a member of Rotary International. Terry, do you want to speak to that maybe?
No, I do not.
You do not. Okay. So it's my understanding that you can, let me just see. The exemption number can be used, and it's open to every member to be able to apply for the use of the 501c4 as a member of Rotary International. This is the information sheet for that. I would look into it, and I have not read it closely. I do know that a lot of clubs, I think ours included, is a 501c4 because of this information. And I know that if you need a certificate of insurance or something else that goes through that, and whatever, there's a cache of information on RI's website that will give you even additional information regarding that tax designation. So by being a member of the parent organization, the Rotary International, I believe that you have to apply to be designated, but you are eligible to be designated as the 501c4 under the Rotary International number.
So
Linda,
one club can have 2 designations then?
oh, yes,
Okay.
without question. That's what the goal of this would be, is that you would have your normal club C4, and then you'd have your C3, which is your charitable side.
Yes.
I'm shocked that you're a C3 and then right from the inception. That's very surprising.
Well, like happens in a few clubs that I've also talked to over the years, things blur, things get lost.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Had trouble finding any kind of correspondence giving us the 501c3 designation.
Ooh,
And
okay.
what are examples of operating funds that you cannot pay for out of, like I get for a 50, if you're only a 501c3, you can use expenses towards fundraising for your 501c3. What are examples of operating funds that are not allowable because it's not considered charitable if
Your
all
mem-
you have is a 501c3?
Your
Like,
membership.
I've never heard this, that you've had to have like both.
Yep, your membership fees, your meals, your ordinary expenses that are associated with what you do as a membership organization, not the charitable side of it, but it comes down to what you're charging your members and what that money's being used for. I mean, the IRS is probably not going to do anything about it, but it's really not the correct way to have to be. But if you already have your C3 status, then you're already ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Andy, did you want to comment on that, being a finance guy?
I concurred with Beth. I think Beth answered that question correctly. Clubs fall under the Rotary International C4 designation, but they still have to submit that application form themselves to the IRS. And it's very likely somebody did that many years ago.
So Andy, my concern that I was a little bit evasive about the answer was I seem to recall that you had to apply to Rotary International when you formed your charter. And I don't know if there's a way to obtain that 501c4 designation through them without doing something further on with Rotary International now.
My
I thought the
understanding,
way our club started, and Andy, maybe you can correct me on this, Methuen Club sponsored us through Rotary District.
Right.
We applied to the IRS and we had a copy of the Rotary International's the IRS determination letter.
Right.
So I don't remember ever going to RI initially other than get the determination letter.
don't have to.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, just have to take that RI number and file with the IRS.
Yep.
If we did, it would be very fortunate for us because the Marblehead Club sponsored it. And there's 2 members from the Marblehead Club that sponsored us to start with.
The problem is we're all getting older and have no memories.
Check out your records, guys. See if you can come up with anything, will you?
I do have to say that I was impressed when I found this information sheet in preparation for tonight that Rotary International did have a lot of your questions answered within that. So I would recommend that you take a look at the handouts that we prepared for you tonight as follow-up to tonight's.
Beth, those were sent to us by email, were they?
They were just before the Zoom meeting opened. I think Alex sent them out under his name to all of you. Or David, you might have sent them out.
I think it was Alex.
Was it Alex? Okay.
And there
I
were
think-
attachments
I
to
think-
the email down below the Zoom link to find them.
I think it would also be helpful to have a follow-up of this on some time on how to set up the accounting for a 501(c)(3). There's a lot of activity in there, and a lot of people make the mistake of creating a chart accounts for every project they have. That's a very common error.
Yep.
And the other thing that becomes difficult in administering it for Rotary is we frequently have money on the books that should be segregated. Managing the segregation of money so that it's not yours really, so that it comes up on the balance sheet that these are funds that are eventually going to go to Rotary International, or it's a kid that gets a 4-year scholarship and you're going to be paying it out year 1, year 2, year 3. You want to set aside that money so you can see it on your balance sheet. And then there are also decisions about whether or not you want to operate on a cash or accrual basis. That's another one.
Oh, wow.
Go ahead, Jack.
I have a question. If we do have some accumulated funds now, can we, once we create the 501c3, can we put some of that money in that? Are we allowed to move money around that is there in our account, in a 501c4 account, because we are a 501c4 already. So in our corporation account, can we transfer money into a 501c3?
I'm going to defer to Beth a little bit on that, because in my understanding, it all depends on what your original bylaws stated as far as what monies you could transfer.
Right.
'Cause you don't want it to be a prohibitive transaction, but a lot of it comes into how the original bylaws were written. And if they're not written to allow you to do that, the nice thing about bylaws are you can amend them.
Right. And just to piggyback on what Ed's saying, bylaws are extremely important. And that's why when you're setting up these organizations, to have your bylaws established with somebody knowledgeable about bylaws and probably knowledgeable about the processes of the purposes that you want to eventually engage in. And so I think we're touching upon that in some of the questions that we're hearing tonight as well, you know, especially the one that was talked about earlier. Why does my club do this versus that? And referred the asker to look at the bylaws. Bylaws should be looked at and reviewed at least every administration. I'm a strong proponent for that. And like Ed said, if it's not working for you, amend them, you know, to fit your purposes.
I have a question for you. On the district level, we have many, many well-heeled clubs, but we also have a lot of clubs that raise charitably $5,000 to $10,000 a year. And so is it worth for them to go and get 501c3, or is there a minimum income that you would look at? Clubs have to bring in 25,000 to make it worth their while. What do you think?
In my opinion, Terry, I would not bother setting up a 501c3 unless I knew I had some events that were going to raise that amount of money, or I know that there's some senior members of the club who have expressed the idea of donating to the club and wanting it to be set up for a charity. I mean, we're not talking a lot of cost to set these up, but it's still the same thing. You have to have people who want to manage them. And we all know the 80-20 rule. We have 100 people and only 20 are doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to double the work those 20 are doing because you've set up this next entity.
So is there a minimum level of income that you would suggest not bothering under that?
My viewpoint,
Yep.
anything under 25,000, I would just keep it going as is.
25,000 annually.
Annually, that would be my viewpoint. Our club, we hit that because of the poker. So we are looking to do that. But there's a lot of clubs out there, as we know, there's some clubs that didn't survive COVID. I mean,
Right.
So do they want to put this extra time in this? Sometimes you expend a lot of effort and you get no reward, you get no payback. So one thing I would challenge any of the clubs who are considering doing the 501c3, make sure you have some other members who are engaged enough that when we're kicking, back on the beach or whatever, this next generation embraces this idea and still wants to do it. Because if you're going to create a legacy, you need to have people there to push it down the road.
I have a
Can you
question.
talk a little, oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
Jeff.
Go ahead.
About using the same people as boards on the 501c4 and the 501c3, but separating out process-wise in meeting minutes or decision-making decisions around funds if you're limited in volunteer capacity. Is it?
You just muted yourself.
Is it possible to have overlapping roles?
So I'll speak to that on a legal side, then Ed, you can speak to it on an accounting side. I look at risk and responsibilities, and I think transparency is always very important. I heard earlier, I believe Ed was advising that you should not probably have the president be the same for both entities. I totally agree with that. if you could have certain, a representative of the C4 be on the board of the C3 and vice versa, I think that should be enough of an overlap as far as I'm concerned. I think it offers good opportunity to get members involved in your organization, and it also provides the transparency that you would need to keep your transactions arm's length. I have had the terrible opportunity to represent a large organization that was a charitable organization where there wasn't a good player within that organization and was not transparent and was in leadership roles and was able to take significant funds for her personal use and spend time in jail for that. And there are bad players, and that's what we're talking about. When you ask about the amount of money that we're involved with, as far as a club that's raising maybe $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year for donations and whatever, that's really not huge amounts of money. And it's very hard, I think, when it's that small amount to not be transparent. The club members are able to follow it, and they're able to look at their expenditures on a balance sheet and understand what it's about. But when you start getting into significant amounts of money that you're raising for one event or ongoing events like the Greater Salem Club has experienced with the gaming incomes that we have, it becomes confusing for the general members, and they don't ask the right questions. They glaze over when we have, the treasurer's reports and whatever. And so that being said, it's always transparency, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just, keep things at arm's length, keep good records, and make sure that you don't have too many people doing too many of the same thing.
Right. The only thing I want to just add to that is, we just got to remember, we don't need to set up a separate entity to give money away. It's to get the money. Like the monies we have received from poker and our golf tournament and our cornhole tournament. Last year we gave $30,000 for fuel assistance among the 5 towns that we take care of. That was spectacular, and it was a year that it was needed. The fact that we are not a C3 did not prevent us from doing it. The fact that we're not a C3 prevents us from getting bequests or other large donations. It does not stop us from servicing the community and being good Rotarians.
Right.
I'd like to just make a comment because somebody just texted me and asked a question because it was under the 5 to 10,000. So I am in a very small club, and that's the range that we raise every year. However, we have 2, even though we're not a C3, a C4, anything, we have 2 separate bank accounts. One is for our operating account and one we call the charity account. And it's not associated with anything else, but any income we get in, we just did a Monopoly game. All the income went into it. We have to pay for the printing. That's coming out of it. And when we sell the boards and we make money on it, it's going to go back into the charity account. So someone was confused thinking that because they were a smaller club that had less donations, they could commingle their money in their operating account.
But Terry, there's a great example.
Yeah.
They're selling a board. They're not selling a charity. So people are buying the boards. It's a fundraising, but it's not charity. I'm not
Right.
writing $100 to buy that Monopoly board. That's what I'm doing. I'm buying a board for $100. I'm not writing a check for $100 as a donation. So what they're
Right.
doing is fine. They don't have to separate it, in all honesty, because
You
it's
would
not
keep that in the
charitable.
operating account?
It's not charitable.
They're providing goods and services.
Right.
Okay, because many years ago, the first time I was president, we had only one account.
Yep.
The assistant governors who came to us, they said, you need to separate your money. Your money is all commingled. When we ran events, a Paul Harris Award or whatever, the money came in, they paid the expenses out, and they kind of kept track of it, and whatever money was left in the account,
Yep.
they gave some to the foundation and they wrote scholarships, but all of the money was commingled. And for transparency's sake, when I first became president, I said, we need to separate these things. And we have one account that's the operating where the dues go in and any happy dollars or whatever. The other account, when we run events, anything that comes in and the expenses are in that. And then we also have a third account, which is our scholarship account, because one of our longtime members passed away and we opened up an account in her memory. And so that's where our scholarship money goes in. So that when we say that we're raising money for do Rotary work, people expect it to go into the charity account and then, get put out to the community. So when I hear that clubs don't have more than one account, it concerns me just because the commingling of money makes it very confusing.
But you're not seeking charitable donations from people. You're selling something. You're selling an
Selling
event. You're
boards or
selling a golf
ads or
course.
whatever. Yep,
So you don't have a charity.
right.
Now, I don't know how the money, you said you have the scholarship fund. I don't know how that initial seed money got in there, whether it was from that person's family.
Right.
That should have been a charity. And I don't know, like let's just say you got that initial seed money by, instead of flowers, in lieu of flowers, send X, Y,
Correct.
Z.
Exactly.
As a Rotary Club, you were not able to really take that money. You did take it and you've set it aside, but you could not turn around and tell these folks, thank you for that charity, because you are not a C3. That's
Correct.
the difference.
All right, and we didn't, and again, we're not talking about any significant money.
Yep.
So,
I have another question. If you, we have a number of people that donate to our club through, actually donate to Rotary Foundation and meet the Paul Harris minimum of $1,000. If in fact you create a 501c3 and you donate to your local club instead of Rotary Foundation, they still get credit for the $1,000 that they contribute to the local 501c3 and get Paul Harris.
They don't get RI district points.
Nope.
Okay, I just, well,
But they would get, if you have a C3, they would get a charitable donation that they can put on their tax return.
no, I got that.
And your club is now building up your own charitable accounts.
Okay. Fair enough.
Am I correct on that, Terry?
yes, you have to donate through Rotary to get points stored up in your name under your ID.
You have to donate to Rotary Foundation.
To the Rotary Foundation in
Right.
any of the areas, polio, the annual fund, or guided giving, a bequest, or whatever it is.
You can't donate that money to your own club.
No.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, John, one point you said that I hope you're not doing it. Are the clubs, is your club accepting the donations from your members and then you guys are writing one big check to foundation?
No.
Okay, great. Because that's a treasurer's nightmare.
No.
Okay.
No. I just wanted to know if we create a 501c3 designation, do they get Paul Harris points if they donate to the local club as
they
opposed to the foundation? And you answered that. Thank you.
And let me tell you that the difference is that when we donate to the Rotary Foundation, the money comes back every year to us in grant money that we can use to do grants in our district and around the world.
That's right.
So yes, it's nice to build up your own foundation within your club to take care of scholarships or whatever, but that's not money that comes back to the district. And every year, what we raised 3 years before, half of it. And so to be able to do all the stuff and for me to be able to tell you to do district managed grants and for us to do global grants, that money needs to come back from the foundation. It's based upon our giving. So, that's why when people ask me, well, I'm giving to my club foundation, doesn't that count? It counts for your club and the work you're doing within your community, but it doesn't count towards our district getting credit for it. You getting credit, then our district gets credit for it. We don't get points, we get credit for it. And that comes back to us half in 3 years. So and it rolls. So every year we get a certain amount that comes back to us. And that's why this year we got over 90,000 coming back to our district, have to use for district managed grants and have to use for global grants. And if our members don't give and that number shrinks, then the work that we can do just gets smaller.
David from Somerville had a question.
Great explanation. Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, my pleasure.
This might be a little odd, but it comes off of something that Arthur said, that they were gonna do for other clubs, like doing parks and whatnot. Can my club accept a gift from a 501c3 that can legally give it to civic organizations? Because what I'm thinking is if we have a member, one or two of the people who really want to do a 501c3 do have a chunk of money that they would like to give to us, but could they just give it to a different 501c3 and they could give it to my club? And then I don't have to set up the 501c3. I've received the money from another organization. And the donor got a tax write-off because he gave it to an organization that is allowed, that is already a 501c3 and is allowed to make said contribution to the Rotary Club.
Let's have the lawyer's answer on that one, please.
Well, I would be suspect, first of all, and I would look at the purpose of the donation, second of all. But I think that that's an accounting question. Why would one 501c3 want to contribute to another 501c3? I know within our club, we have a policy that we do not give to other 501c3s. It's brought into question whenever we have another 501c3 that has no relation to Rotary that wants to solicit us for funding. Ed, do you have anything more that you would want to add to that? I'm just kind of at a loss right now to why someone would be a 501c3 and contribute to another 501c3, unless it's a major project of some kind that is aligned.
If I understood David's question, and I'm French and Irish, so I may not have. If I am the 501c3 and John Smith wanted to give me 50,000, and in turn, I'm supposed to give it to your Rotary Club of Somerville, I would say, we have a 25% processing fee for that, but I would certainly consider doing that.
That's what I wanted to know.
I don't believe.
I'll add to this. You're ultimately, if you're managing the 501c3, you're responsible to make certain that the ultimate use of the funds meets the charitable purposes that you applied for.
Yeah.
But it all depends.
Once you give the money to another 501c3.
No, he's giving it to a 501c4.
Once he's given to the 501c4, you've lost control of that purpose. They may do something with it you don't want.
Give it to a 501c4.
That's right.
That's right.
So you don't want to have that. When I do this, I control the funds and make certain that the ultimate destination of the money is something that I think is acceptable.
Right. David, if the money's significant enough, set up the 501c3.
Yeah.
Do the 1023 EZ form, and in 6 weeks, you'll have your determination letter.
But it is useful. It is useful. For example, I did a joint project with Chelsea. They actually do have a 501c3 for raising funds for a service dog. And I ran all the money from Chelsea and from us. They actually took money out of their 501c3 and gave it to me for, into our 501c3, but it was all part of the, a conjoined district managed grant. And so, you just have to apply good thinking with this kind of stuff, because the IRS isn't looking to create a problem for you.
Right. And that's why I'm deferring to more of an accounting issue, because when I look at this as a legal issue, I would have to question why. I would question the bylaws. I would question the purposes. Whereas the IRS, it's following the funds, and hopefully, it's probably less of an issue because it's black and white, following the donations back and forth.
I mean, the ones that are really looking at this more closely is actually in the Secretary of State's office, the Division of Public Charities. That's where they're really looking at it.
So, and that's where the legal gets involved,
Right.
And it has nothing to do with the amount of money. It has to do why.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Terry, I'm going to just bring to your attention that it is past the dated hour, but if we want to take one more question, I think we could answer one more question. If not,
Anybody got a question? And I say thank you very much for coming.
Thanks,
This was
everybody.
wonderful, a
Thank
good
you.
group.
thank you.
Thank you, Terry,
Yeah.
David, and Alexander, who I assume is in bed now,
Yes.
for organizing all of this.
Yeah, yeah. it
And
was
this
good.
is being recorded, and so you'll be able to find it on the district website soon.
Good night.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Very-
guys. Thank you very much. Very helpful.
Good
Very
night.
worthwhile. Yes,
Thank you.
very worthwhile. Thank
everybody.
you very much.